Good morning, Alita. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
I am doing really well this morning. So why don't tell me a little bit about who Alita is?
Yeah, so I'm an intuitive life strategist, and it's really a fancy way of saying that I teach people how to tap back in to the inner voice that guides them to greatness. And it came because I had battled for about 20 years with depression. I had 3 different doctors diagnose me with clinical depression. I battled with obesity. I was a compulsive overeater. And I also had chronic illnesses. So I had fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr, chronic fatigue, and chronic bronchitis. And I went through this process of realizing that something inside of me was just constantly pulling me back into the illness. The illnesses were functioning as a way of keeping me playing safe in life. And when I got that 3rd diagnosis and the doctors attempted to put me on antidepressants, I realized I didn't want to take that route. And I basically devoted my entire attention to finding another way. So once I was able to crack the code, I lost 80 pounds. I cracked the depression. I became one of the happiest people that, all of my friends and family and clients actually have ever met. And I was able to really just come to a place of absolute health that I'm not even affected by cold and flu season anymore. So I've become basically a walking billboard for what's possible when we make a conscious choice to live intuitively. So I've been doing it now for almost 15 years.
Yeah, wow. Now, when you said you cracked the code, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you working at the time? Like, how were you functioning with the illnesses? Were you functioning at a productive level?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I mean, I battled. There were weeks where I would struggle to even get out of bed to go to work. And I remember, calling my boss and saying, look, I'm really suffering today. And she said to me, look, Alita, like, I get that you're suffering. She said, however, like, we need someone here. The business still has to continue to go on, and your job is very important. And if you're not here to do your job, then the whole business suffers as a whole. And it was hard for me because I knew that the depression was keeping me stuck. And the longer I was depressed, the more I got sick. And so I would go to school and to work. I was working 3 part-time jobs. I was going to college. And I remember, being in class with these severe sinus infections, and my face would be running and my eyes would be running. And I didn't even want to leave the house. It was just super, super painful just living in that constant state of just ickiness. I was dancing at the time. I was teaching dance. And I remember for 8 weeks, I had like walking pneumonia. And, going to just even being there to teach class was just absolutely miserable. And I just remember that pain and that suffering. I'm like, I can't stop. I can't stop. I have to keep going because this mindset, I have to prove my worth, was so strong that I wasn't willing to give in to the illness. And I think that when I finally got that 3rd diagnosis and the doctor said to me, what's really going on in your life that you're not happy with, that you're misaligned with, like, what is it that's not going right for you? I just realized in that moment that there were so many things I was doing to push myself and prove my worth that I wasn't even listening to my body. I wasn't listening to my heart. I wasn't listening to my passion. I was living in misery. And I wasn't really even showing up for myself because I was just a martyr, 100%. And everything showed it,
Yeah.
My performance showed it. My health showed it,
So did you feel it as your head's telling you to go on and go on, your mind's going on? What did you feel in your body? Like, at times I've had anxiety but it's in my body. Like, you can feel it in the abdomen, and it's like your body saying, pay attention. Did you feel anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, I knew that there was something inside. However, I was at that time, I grew up with a very logical mom. So expressing emotions, when I was going through depression, she didn't really understand what I was going through. She actually took me for drug testing because she thought I was taking drugs. Mm-hmm. And so when she realized, okay, she's completely sober, so obviously drugs is not the answer. it was still very challenging for her to understand what I was going through. Why are you not able to just choose to get out of the cloud that you're describing? And so what I felt and what I experienced, a lot of those emotions, instead of giving myself permission to feel, I would numb with food. And so I would literally eat and overeat to the point where when I would start to feel any of those emotions, I could completely eat so much that I would make myself pass out and I could just sleep all day so that I didn't have to feel. So it wasn't until I lost the weight and all of those emotions started they get released from the fat cells. I think a lot of people don't realize this. When we gain weight, the emotions get stuck in the fat cells. And when I started losing the weight, all of those emotions got released back into my system. And now I had no other choice but to face them. And during that time, right, I started numbing myself with bodybuilding, or I started numbing myself with dieting and then supplements and all these kind of things to eventually mask the pain and the suffering. And it wasn't until I think I went through a very toxic breakup after I had already gone through, the body image issues and all these things and dealing with this. It wasn't until I had actually had something massively significant in my life that I felt and experienced anxiety for my first time, because I wasn't hiding behind the food. I wasn't hiding behind, the supplements. I wasn't hiding behind, excessive working out. I had no choice but to listen. And I really was not connected with my body during those times, because I would just eat to numb the pain or work out to numb the pain. There was no connection whatsoever.
Yeah, I get that. I've been there. Up until about 5 years ago, I guess about 5 years ago, when I realized I was codependent and how emotionally unwell I was. Up until that time, I shopped and worked out. So I get it. It was like, the stores knew me by name. And I think the turning point for me, where I kind of realized that was a little problem even before I got healed, was one year our credit card company sent out like an annual statement that was a breakdown of where you spent money. And I think I'd spent $12,000 in retail and returned, it was either 9 or 10,000. And I kind of looked and went, yeah, that might be a little problem. And I'm like, because that was my fill. Like yours was eating. I would just go and I would go buy something knowing full well that I was not keeping it. It was going back the next day,
Yeah.
And it's funny. I don't know about you with food, but now, like when I get anxious, if I try to resort back to that habit, if I try to go shop, I'm like, damn, it's not working. It doesn't work. I guess I just have to sit with it. So, from that time where you lost the weight and till the breakdown when you realized that you were numbing, how long of a span was that?
I was really coherent, really with my body, probably for the first year and a half until I started bodybuilding. I started bodybuilding in 2000. Well, I did my first competition in 2006. And so between 2006 and 2009 was when I was really going through that period of understanding how disconnected I'd truly been. However, I started the disconnect when I was 6, when my parents got divorced and I started eating excessively, because that was really when sugar became a factor in my life. It was that, going to visit my father after my parents separated, and we would go to the grocery store and we would go to buy cupcake mix and pre-made frosting, and we would get Hostess cream pies, and we would eat the Hostess cream pie on the way back to the apartment as we would walk, which was only a block. And then we'd go home and then we'd make the cupcakes. And so the concept was being around my father, and sugar meant love. Junk food meant love. And so when my father wasn't around and he stopped being a part of my life, sugar became that substitute for my father not being there. So it's like, right, obviously we know when we talk about mental health, I was in this beautiful hypnotic state, right? In this theta, whatever state of my brain waves, going through childhood. And when my parents separated, I went straight into logic and reason, going, wait a second, all of the things that I thought were real that I've been hypnotized with are now gone. And now all of a sudden I had to attempt to make logic and reason out of what was going on. So the logic and the reason were dad equals sugar equals love. And so I became addicted from a very, very early age. So it was from the age of 6 all the way through 21 when I got that final diagnosis and realized that I was addicted to food. I ended up going to culinary school when I was 21 because I wanted to learn how to make the foods that I was addicted to healthy for me.
Right.
And when I was there, I learned and I started studying nutrition and started studying working out. However, the true connection still did not exist. And while I was able to break the chronic illness and I was able to break the depression and I was able to lose all of the weight, it wasn't until, 2010 that I really started understanding, what anxiety felt like and how many years I had actually struggled with that and how I had numbed it and disconnected from it for all of these years. So it was a very, very long period of my life going through all those struggles and changes. And, in 2011, I think, 2012 was when it really smacked me on the head because I was in class, I was studying spiritual psychology at the University of Santa Monica. And we spent, the first year, every school weekend, we would battle, or not battle, I'd say battle. We would be in tears, basically, from the second we started school on Friday night to Sunday night, which was part of the school weekend, clearing limiting beliefs. And so that final week of class, in 6 years ago, basically, last week, 6 years ago, in 2012, we had our final week, which was a lab, and every single day we're clearing limiting beliefs all day, all day, all day. And I remember about halfway through that point, our professor says, okay, bring forward something that you have not been willing to face all of these 9 months. And I was like, I'm good. I've cleared so many things. I've got this. And I hear this little voice from my higher self say, Alida, you have a body image issue. And I was like, what? No, I don't. And I was like, well, obviously if I have resistance, that's where I need to go. And I think it was in that moment that was what was really just this massive turning point, because as soon as I started going there, my entire body got sick. And all of the mutations of those chronic illnesses, I ended up having a miscarriage, didn't even know I was pregnant. And I actually had a full on, I don't even want to say near death anymore. It was a full on death experience where I actually crossed over. And it was that moment where it kind of shook me back into my body to say, like, look, you've been doing all this work. You've been studying, you've been, doing the personal development, and you've been doing the exercises, and you've been following the theories. However, like, if you're not inside of your body, what good is any of it? And so it was really just kind of like that turning point of like, yeah, there are moments in my life where I get reconnected. However, I feel like there's this perpetual lesson that I've been needing to learn, like this spiritual curriculum that I've needed to learn in this life, where I keep getting revisited by that same message: get back into your body, get your body, get reconnected, get aware, and that's really the context of how I coach, because it's like I use the life lessons that I gain along the way to be able to say to my clients, okay, look, this is the new lesson that I've just learned. How can I share it with you, and how can it support you? So it's almost like I have these struggles so that I'm able to be a better coach,
Yes. Yeah. And I totally get that, because that's what I feel. Everything, I always say my story is my gift, because it made me very empathetic towards others and not sympathetic, and then I can say, like, man, I get it. I've been there. And I've been exactly what you're saying about a month or two ago, because personal development, I'm not sure if we ever totally 100% heal. What are your feelings on that?
There's a challenge with this one, because I've basically studied comparative religions probably since I was 6. And the concept of enlightenment, I think, really is what a lot of people have a tendency to take very, very much with a grain of salt. So we have this idea that we want to heal completely because we want to end the suffering. We just want to get out of the pain. And that's not possible. That is absolutely not possible. However, what I will say is, from the studies and from the things that I've learned from these different religions, it is possible to transcend. So if we're looking from a place of being in the mud, and the mud is in our eyes, and the mud is our identity, no, there is absolutely no way that we will ever heal from this. However, If we use it as a stepping stone to transcend the human experience, then yes, it is possible. And that's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
The healing process, I believe, is really a process of understanding forgiveness and letting go from a structure of reframing how we perceive the experience. If we look at quantum physics, just as an example, and I won't go too geeky on this, they've actually shown that what you perceive in the current moment, if it shifts about your past, you can actually change the past. And this is really kind of a crazy concept. Like, it's mind blowing. However, they've actually started to do studies, and they found that, the research and the things that they've done and the structures and the tools that they've used, they've actually found that they can actually impact the past. So it's a fascinating study, and I don't think we fully grasp it at this point. However, I do believe it is possible if we are not looking to escape from the suffering.
Right. And I think when you were saying also that forgiveness, I think the key to all of this, it all boils down to self. Everything, every problem, every reaction we have, everything boils down to either there's not a great sense of self, there's little self-trust, self-esteem, it all has to start within. And that's so hard. Have you found most of your clients are resistant to going within, or by the time they come to you, they're open?
You know what? That's a really interesting question. So I do not have people come to me who are not ready. In the event that they do come to me and they're not ready, I'm very quick to say, I'm not coaching you.
Yeah.
Mainly just because, I learned really early on that the ones who have resistance are going to drain my energy, because I'm going to be the only one fighting for them. I'm going to be the only one holding the light. I'm going to be the only one motivating them. And they're going to be waiting for me to change their life. And I'm very, very big on responsibility consciousness, right? Because if we look at quantum physics, or even just law of attraction, right? Let's just take it down to the secret or law of attraction. Sure. Everything that we believe about our life and about ourselves is going to manifest in the form of reality. So if I have a client who's not willing to take ownership for how they're showing up in their life, there's nothing I can do to support them in creating any sort of change.
Right.
Because if someone's in a constant state of blame, it's someone else's fault, it's circumstances, it's luck, it's privilege, it's my genetics, right? I'm proof positive that epigenetics works. And epigenetics is one of my favorite studies about how we can literally change the expression of DNA. So it really just boils down to a desire to choose a different reality than we're currently living in. And once we do that, we're able to take responsibility for how we're showing up as a construct of what we're experiencing.
Right. So what type of questions do you ask your clients to determine whether or not they are open with it?
Well, it's really more of a conversation. I listen to how people talk about the world around them. Okay. Right. So it's like, for instance, my mom shared this with me at one point. She says, when I meet somebody new, when I meet a new guy and he seems like a potential candidate, I ask him, have you been married before? Right? Have you been in a relationship before? And if all they can do is talk about everything that everyone else did wrong.
Yes.
I know immediately that this person is 100% resistant to actually taking ownership for how they showed up.
Yeah.
So that right there is a huge indicator for me. And if I talk to someone who says, I'm so ready, I just don't know why I never take action. I know what I need to do. I'm just not taking action.
So what do you do with someone if they are taking action but still not moving?
Well, it gives me an opportunity to really calibrate, because a lot of times people don't realize that they have disconnected intentions that they're setting out into the universe or into their goals or into their prayer even. So most people who are struggling with that, they're doing what they think they're supposed to be doing, not what's in their highest good.
Yeah.
So for instance, right?
That was me. You were talking to her.
Yeah. And so being busy just to be busy, right? So we wake up first thing in the morning and we make a to-do list and we jump into the world and we do everything that we think we're supposed to be doing, instead of going, okay, wait a second. You know what? according to what my purpose and my passion are, what 3 things can I do today that would actually support me in moving in that direction? Right. And that's a very different conversation that we need to be having with ourselves. However, if you are a martyr, if you are a people pleaser, if you are someone that feels that you have to prove your worth to other people, or you have to validate yourself by their, redeeming, words towards you, then you're going to not give yourself permission to put yourself as the number one priority. So the conversation has to go, why are you not your number one priority?
Right.
Why are you not giving yourself permission to be the number one focus before you feed everybody else? Because what's going to happen is, at the end of the day, if you have not filled your cup up, you're feeding everyone from an empty cup.
Yeah.
And my philosophy is that if we're going to serve anyone in the world, we have to serve from the overflow. We have to serve from the saucer, not from the cup itself.
Yeah.
So that's the conversation that has to be had.
I totally agree. Do you start your patients with body work then? I mean, not body work, but working on getting rid of negative energy in the body before you try to change the mindset?
Nope, not at all. Here's why. So I worked with an organization for roughly about 10 months, and we did 100% energy work. So it was DNA clearing, consciousness, all that kind of stuff. I have never been energetically attacked until I started working with that organization. And for all 10 months, I was energetically attacked.
Really?
Here's why. Because the belief that energetic attacks existed was put into my consciousness.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so there is a tribe of Indians. I believe it's the Hopi, if I'm not mistaken. They have never been affected by a genocide or evil overtaking by any sort of outside civilization. And the reason why is because in their consciousness, they do not believe in dark forces.
Right.
Their culture does not talk about a dark side, demons, evil spirits. They don't even know that exists. And if this world, this structure, this construct of our earth is all based on thought, and our thoughts now, they can actually measure our thoughts outside of our brain. So now we have proof that we are vibrational beings, vibrational organisms. If the belief that we have is that evil forces existed and negativity exists, well, if I'm already in a negative space and I'm telling you, okay, you got to clear your negative energy, well, now I'm giving you more permission to focus on your negativity.
Yeah.
So what it requires is building up self-trust. Something as simple as making your bed every single morning can make a world of difference when it comes to learning how to trust yourself to make the right decisions.
Right.
And from there, we drown out the negativity with positivity.
Do you have them develop some type of self-care routine? Because I found what I did in my process years ago was I dove right into like all the courses that have you retrain, NLP and all that. But I did not establish any self-care. So the more I got involved in the programs, the less I cared for myself. Yeah. Because I was so involved in the doing. And it was when I asked you earlier about that feeling in your gut, what I had was like this constant thing, like it was just, something was trying to get out. And it was like, I didn't know what it was. And I realized I'm like, climbing up the wrong tree, Yeah, that was it. I mean, and actually you should send me a bill, because when you said earlier, like the people pleasers, I've worked with coaches and I do what they say. And I would, in the past, I have done that. But you're right. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. But because of the people pleaser, the old codependency, I didn't really say, no, it's not me. And if they said it's fear, I'd be like, no, it's not me. This isn't who I am. So thank you for that mini coaching. A couple years late, but it's still enlightening.
Never too late.
Never too. So, I did want to ask you, have you heard of the ACEs study? The Adverse Childhood Experience Study?
For me, it really relates a lot to that marshmallow test that we were talking about also.
Right.
Marshmallow experiment.
Go ahead and talk. Why don't you say what we had mentioned about the marshmallow test in case the listeners don't know what the marshmallow test is?
I believe it was done about 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And the researchers created this experiment where they sat a child in a room with a marshmallow. And they said, if you wait to eat this marshmallow, when I come back, you'll get a second one. So they decided to test, whether or not the kids were able to sustain and delay gratification. And they followed them in their life to see how they performed on test scores and how they were able to actually basically show up in life and show up in excellence. Now, one of the things that did not take into account, they believed that the children who were not able to delay gratification were the ones who were literally not able to do well in school and not able to actually go out and create success. However, when they revisited the test, what they found was that the original test did not take into account socioeconomic factors. So when they revisited the test, they started realizing that children who were unable to delay gratification had very serious struggles at home. They didn't know that tomorrow was going to be guaranteed. They didn't know that, they would have another meal. They didn't have parents who were highly educated, and their parents maybe didn't necessarily put an emphasis on their education or performance. Their parents didn't teach them about these things because they most likely didn't have those same tools. So that was more of a factor of that. And it really, for me, just kind of brought to mind when I was growing up, and all of a sudden my parents, I went from a 2-income household where in the 80s, my parents were making over $100,000 to a 1-income household where all of a sudden my mom's working anywhere between 3 to 5 jobs to support me. There was a huge, huge struggle. Yeah. And it really, for me, explained why I became a food addict.
You know what? I mean, I think it's funny in my experience, because I worked with low income families for almost 25 years. And, I think that the financial lack is just another symptom of the underlying. It's just a feeling of not being safe. Mm-hmm. I would imagine if you're growing up in a wealthy family and you're abused and you don't feel safe, I think you're going to get that same results on the marshmallow test. I haven't read into that in detail, but that safety factor as a child is huge. And the reason I'd mentioned the ACEs test is that, and ironically, it was a study that started from obesity, but where it relates to your story very highly is that they prove that every time you don't feel safe, right? We have fight or flight, which they call fight, flight, or freeze. That gets triggered and multiple things happen in your body. It's kind of like when if you ever almost got in a car accident in your body, like you tighten up and your heart pounds, and that's fight, flight, or freeze. But when that's triggered all the time in childhood, one of the things that happens is the release of cortisol. Cortisol causes inflammation in the body, which is a good thing when you need it. But when it happens all the time, it starts to attack the organs. And it starts to cause inflammation, and you get fibromyalgia, and you get, like I have 3 or 4 autoimmune diseases. And so this ACEs gave scientific proof. It validated how much really our stories impact us. It also changes neural pathways in the structure of the brain. So, and it changes DNA. If you're pregnant and you suffer some type of trauma, it can change the DNA of your fetus. So yeah, this stuff is like some serious, it explains so much of human behavior. Yeah. I meant to ask too, and was your dad obese? Did he have a weight problem?
He battled with food. Yeah. Sugar was definitely his issue. Alcohol.
I was going to say, was he a former alcoholic?
Yeah. You know what? I think he was just an addict in general. It was a compulsive behavior that he had. So if it wasn't cigarettes, it was alcohol. When he attempted to break the cigarette addiction, he went to cigars and then began smoking them like cigarettes. So then, he switched off of that to something else and something else and something else. So I think for my dad, it was really more of a structural thing. He needed to have something that he could depend on. And he had a really rough childhood. His father was very verbally and emotionally abusive. So like, I know that was the cause for him. And so he did battle with those things for a very long time. I haven't spoken to him since 2004. So I do know that in the time that he was in my life, he did battle with those things for sure.
After your childhood, after all the struggles or challenges you face, what's your definition of self-love?
Awareness. Absolutely.
I love that. That one I haven't heard from anyone yet. I love that.
Yeah, because when I wake up in the morning, I bring myself back into my body. So I become aware that I have woken up into this body for a reason, for a purpose. Instead of me going into this day going, oh, it's Monday. It's like, well, wait a second, hold on. There's a purpose for me being alive. Not quite sure what it is. However, let me be curious about it and see how my beingness affects the world around me. So it really is awareness. It's about loving myself enough to be aware of how I'm showing up and how my beingness affects the world.
Yeah. And like you and I both numbed in a lot of people, awareness of what you're feeling and just going, okay, like I do this thing called I'm a Star I started a while ago. And it's like, just every time I get into my car, when I first wake up in the morning, I'm like, stop, take a couple deep breaths and just check in and go, what am I feeling? Anxious, happy, sad, nothing, and just check in occasionally to see what you are feeling. How would you define love?
Love is unconditional acceptance, 100%.
Okay.
I find most people to have a tendency to believe that love is some sort of a projection. It's an action. It's like a habitual kind of process, or it's some sort of doingness. However, to me, love is really the fundamental core of what we are. And so to truly experience the giving and receiving of love, we have to practice unconditional acceptance. And this is a very, very controversial subject. However, it's something I highly believe in because of studying comparative religions, that even the people that we think that we hate the most, right? The highest, most evolved and most enlightened spiritual teachers say to us, when you can love the people who have hurt you the most, you know truly what love is.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of people over my lifetime, and I've always asked questions like this just to strangers in the store, just because that was my way of coping as a kid, was connection. But, I almost don't like using the word love because I don't think many people really understand what love is.
Mm-hmm.
I think we romanticize love. It's like that, Jerry Maguire, You Complete Me, and whatever our parents saw on the old screen, the movies, all the romance stuff. But that's really not love. I mean, that's in love and can lead to a love. But the kind of love that's going to heal the world, that's not that kind of love.
Are you familiar with the work of David Hawkins?
No.
So he wrote this incredible book, and his life work was all about vibration. And David Hawkins he wrote this book called Power versus Force, and it talks about the vibrations of specific beingnesses. And he talked about how fear and apathy, depression are all on the lower vibrational frequencies. And things like joy, abundance, love are on the higher vibrational frequencies. And he said most people do not vibrate at those frequencies. And he actually taught muscle testing. So you can actually muscle test to see what vibrational frequency someone is vibrating at, right? And so one of the things that he found, and there was a study that was actually done, I believe in DC, where they had a group of people who meditated for a specific amount of time on love and peace and abundance. And it literally decreased the amounts of homicide and robberies and just overall crime in the city. Because what happened was the people raised their vibration to such a high level of that love and joy and abundance that they were able to neutralize those negative frequencies that were running so rampant in the city.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times when we look at love, our perception of love is very jaded based on how we grew up. For instance, my most recent ex grew up in a very toxic situation as a child. And his experience with love was very distant. It was very harsh. There was no allowance of vulnerability. So when I showed up vulnerable, it was almost like, oh, what are you doing? That's not what love is. Because we are taught and we are conditioned with these beliefs that love is a certain way. And we don't really give ourselves permission to understand that it's so much bigger and so much grander than the human mind can comprehend, that when we surrender our need to judge it in a certain way, we actually allow the truth of what love can be to enter into our lives.
Yeah. I for me, I would define love as just acceptance and understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not tolerance. It's acceptance.
Acceptance. Yeah, there is a difference. Like, to go like, okay, like there's somebody who looks totally different than me. And I don't understand. I can't put myself in their shoes, but I'm going to embrace them anyway, because we're just having a shared experience, Yeah. Did you have trouble setting boundaries when you were a kid?
Very much
Were you
so.
a people pleaser?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I still struggle with it. I still, find myself falling into that pattern. And now I catch myself. However, it's still, I still feel it. It's a pull. Mm-hmm. And, something as simple as, like a friend messaged me today and was like, hey, can you meet up at the beach today? And the pull of like, oh, he needs my support. I need to go and rush to go support him. It's like, whoa, wait a second, hold on. I have a full day planned for me. Like, who comes first? Am I going to be operating from a full cup? So I feel that pull it wants to pull me back. And it's an interesting conundrum, to go through. Yeah. However, yep.
It is. So when did you stop struggling with self-confidence? Or was your weight not about confidence? It was about control.
I think after 2012, it stopped being the issue. Mm-hmm. It wasn't so much about me hiding behind a super fit body.
Right.
It wasn't about me eating clean in order to look good. It wasn't about me, working out in order to look good. It was about me, after 2012, I had like a 6-month recovery period where I had dropped 20 pounds from not being able to eat and, being stuck in the hospital and all this kind of stuff. And so it took me about 6 months to actually get right with myself and really just get my health back. And I was like, you know what? I'm just so happy to be alive right now that like, I just want to listen to my body and honor my body with whatever food my body wants to eat right now. And there are days when I go paleo, there's days where I go keto, there's days where I go fully raw and I eat only fruit during the day. And my body is not, I don't look like a competitor. I look fit and I'm okay with that. It's not about the perfection. It's about me looking how I feel.
Right.
And if I feel good on the inside, I don't need to mask it with.
Yeah. It's funny when I worked, as a home care nurse, and I was getting really frustrated with our system because most of my clients were on welfare and the system just kept throwing more and more benefits their way. And I'm like, you're making it worse. The problem is you can pick them up, carry them, take them to the doctors. And if you make them wait more than a minute, they're going to leave. Because like the key is you got to get them to care about themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because when I feel horrible, when I feel like crap, I don't go to the gym. And when we don't feel good about ourselves, we don't take care of ourselves. That's it.
Yep.
Someone could give you $1 million if you're super down on yourself, for that day. If you don't feel like going out and doing something, you won't. It doesn't really matter. Yeah. So the control, did you have control issues then? Do you think your overeating came from control or fear?
It was a combination, for sure. It was definitely a combination. So it was a need for control, because I needed to prove to myself that I would always have enough, because we were struggling with money. So that fear of not having enough, and also me controlling, like, oh, okay, well, I have money now. Let me go spend it on food, because now I can spend it on whatever kind of food I want.
Yeah.
Right. So it was both. However, it was also the need for security.
Yeah. That's safety.
Because, being obese protected me from going out and living up to my full potential. Being obese gave me the excuse to always be sick, to always fall back on my promises and my commitments. It gave me an excuse to not show up in the world because I didn't go to a pool because I didn't want to show up in a bathing suit. Right. I didn't want to go to public places because I felt fat and I felt ugly and I felt I didn't feel good about myself. So it gave me an excuse to actually not go out and explore and be adventurous and take risks. Losing the weight gave me that kind of freedom. However, it was still very scary.
Yeah.
Extremely scary, because now I was seen, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be seen. Right.
Well, how did you move beyond because once I had eating disorder also.
Mhm.
And when I was 16, I think after a couple months, I had like a combination of bulimia and anorexia where I wouldn't really eat much of anything, but what I ate, I'd throw up. And I remember I'd ask my parents for help, and they just didn't believe in therapists. But it took years. I was able to beat the physical part of it. It took a while, a couple of years, but the emotional, the what I saw, that self-image lasted for like, I think until I got pregnant, and that's what changed it. But for you, did your image of did you still see heavy, and how long after you lost the weight?
After I lost the weight, I was pretty secure. It wasn't until after I did my first bodybuilding show that I had the backlash. And someone actually, she recommended to me, she's like, look, I know you're 4 days out from your show. She said, I recommend you get a therapist for the second you step off the stage. And I was like, look, I'm fine. The weight has been off for a few years now. I'm good. Like, I got this. And I thought I had it all together. And in that first week after my first show, I gained 15 pounds.
Wow.
And I was like, "Ruh," and I was walking like a bodybuilder because my whole body it went, because you refuel, like you're not depleted anymore. And that was horrible. That was horrific. And so I ended up falling into my boyfriend at the time, who was a competitive bodybuilder. I just started dieting with him every time he dieted for another show, because like, okay, let me get back in shape. Let me get back in shape. And it was never about me being optimally healthy. It was about me eating so that I could look a certain way, so that I could keep the image of who I thought I was supposed to be. Yeah.
So I'm gonna segue into this one from that, and it may not seem like a good segue to other people, but did you ever crave anyone's love that you didn't get?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, all the time. My dad, 100%. My dad was very distant for the majority of my childhood after he left. Mm-hmm. Not while he was here. I was never without his love. However, when he left, he immediately went into a relationship with a woman who already had 2 kids, and one of them was a son. And I always wondered why he took to the son so voraciously. And it wasn't until I was 18 that he was going through therapy, and he said, "Oh, honey, I forgot to tell you, I learned something about myself in therapy." And I was like, "Well, what is that?" And he goes, "I had a son." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "Yeah, before your mom and I met, I had a baby with this other woman, and he died when he was 3 months old, and blah, blah, blah." And I was like, huh. So, yeah. And so, during the course of me growing up, there would be months where I would go months without seeing my father, in not even into my teens. I was still in elementary school. And there would be months where he would literally just come to the house and drop off the child support check and then race back to his car, and not even checking to see if I was home.
Wow. So how does that make you feel as a kid?
I mean, as a kid, I felt not good enough for sure. And there would be moments when I would reach out to have there was literally a moment where I had secured tickets to the Angel game on the club level, because I knew he was a hardcore baseball fan. On the club level, I got us brunch at the buffet that was there. It's really nice on the club level brunch. And he showed up in sweats, socks with flip-flops, so thongs with socks, and sweatshirt and a baseball cap. And I was like, okay, cool. And all he could do was complain about how it was too fancy for him.
Yeah.
And it was kind of in that moment that I kind of realized, you know what? I feel like I'm attempting to make someone love me who just doesn't want to be with me and just doesn't want to be present with me. And I think it was kind of in that moment that I just started distancing myself, because I realized at some point that while I felt like crap all of those years, that I wasn't good enough for him to stay around, or I wasn't good enough for him to love me, I started realizing that, you know what? Sometimes relationships don't work out, and it's okay that you need to break up with someone. And that was just kind of what I decided, after years and years and years and years and years of attempting to have a conversation, or even just get him to just accept me as I was. I just realized, you know what? We're just on 2 totally different paths. And while I'm always going to love him and I will respect him for his choice and his decision, I'm not willing to continue to sacrifice my heart and my energy on someone who's not willing to meet me halfway.
Yeah, I did that about a year or two into my healing with my dad. There was nothing you could do. I mean, he lived with us and it was just daily like backlash. And, it was 2010, right around the year you were changing my life, turned into Jerry Springer. My ex started dating a next door neighbor. She was living with her boyfriend. That was the mild of it. It was like a year of just, thank God back then I laughed also. I did self-deprecating humor in these little gig to deal with my pain. But if I didn't have that, I got to be honest with you, I'm not sure how I would have dealt. But anyhow, during that time, my dad had lived with us and I had to have him move out because we needed the extra bedroom. My ex wouldn't leave the house. And every day my dad would just come over and go like, you ruined my life. You ruined my life. You ruined my life every day. And I looked and went, do you ever care about like how we're doing or your grandkids? Like ever? And I think at one point he said to me, he goes, you're an island. I said, you made me an island. Like that was, so it's same thing. I identified same thing with you. It's just you got to go like done. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
And it's amazing with kids with safety and security. I have a 26-year-old son, and he's said some really amazing things to me sometimes, like out of the mouths of our kids, right? And he goes, look, you just have to like look at people's intention. He said, if there's malice, then you can take it personally. But if there's no malice, you just have to accept people the way they are and expect nothing. And it is what it is. Someone's not giving you something not because they don't love you, it's because they don't have it to give.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought, I did a good job. I raised them well and they taught. So, letting go has always been a challenge for me, though.
Yeah.
Of just people or in things, anything. Letting go is tough. How would you describe your childhood growing up? One word.
Blessed.
Blessed.
I mean, yeah, honestly, it was blessed. My mom fought so hard to make sure that I had a good childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, it is miraculous what my mom was able to accomplish to really support me in living the life that I did. Yeah. I mean, the house that she bought my father out of because she was determined to keep me in the house that I grew up in and have that stability and have that comfort for me. The way that she fought to keep me in public or in private school and in dance for as long as she could without his support. She did everything that she possibly could to make sure that I had the best life ever. I mean, my mom she didn't have a lot of money, yet she was adamant about making sure that I traveled. She sent me to Europe when I was in high school. I mean, these were things that were very important to her because she never got to experience these things. And without the help of my father.
Were they important to you?
Yes.
Or did you get what you needed? Were you blessed in the emotional support area?
My mom and I have really great conversations. She's always very open to communicate with me. And so it really just boiled down to me being so right brain dominant and her being so left brain dominant that we balanced each other out.
Gotcha.
I think is really more the case. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm going to close this up by just like we've been chatting with a couple like quick fire round questions. So some of them I'll like just fill in the blank of the sentence. Okay. Yeah. So the woman you see in the mirror today is blank. Fill that in.
So much better than I ever knew she could be.
The woman you want to see in the mirror 10 years from now.
An example of what's possible when all risks are taken.
Greatest fear.
Dying with dreams left unlived.
I hear you on that one.
Yeah.
Biggest accomplishment.
Never giving up on myself.
Greatest struggle.
Doing all the things that I know I'm capable of doing in just one lifetime.
Very cool. Red or blue? That was just to throw you off.
Always the red pill. Always the red pill.
Always the red pill. If I said to you before you die, what's one thing you must accomplish?
I have a legacy that I'm looking to create. And I want to create a legacy of responsibility consciousness.
Okay.
such that my life inspires people to take ownership of how their life looks and feels. And
Is,
this work, I want to be so impactful and so powerful that it continues when I pass.
is that what you want them to say at your funeral then? When people are at your funeral and they're saying, she was such a, what would you like to hear them say?
I want them to say that she taught me to do everything I thought I could without fear, without limit, without hesitation.
What's the craziest thing you've done to ditch fear? Where you've gone, like people go, oh my God, she's nuts.
I went to Machu Picchu in April in less than 24 hours. That's my most recent one. I literally made the decision on Sunday night and like about 7:30 at night. And by 11 o'clock the next morning, I was on a plane to Machu Picchu.
I love that. I love that. Okay. Last one is self-trust. Have you, when you trust yourself, have you made more good decisions or not so good decisions?
When I trust myself, every decision is a good decision. It's always for the highest good and everyone benefits.
Is it always, do you always know immediately that was a good decision?
100%.
Oh.
Because I can see it play out. In that moment, I trust myself so much to make the proper decision, the most appropriate, the highest good decision in that moment, that I can see every single person that it's going to impact in a positive way.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous. All right. So if people want to hire you, audience, you'd be crazy not to. You could have saved me thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars years ago. But
People tell me that a lot.
yeah. So where can they reach you?
You can find me at my website, ambassadorforgoodness.com. And then I'm on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook. I'm also on Snapchat and I'm on Twitter as well.
Okay. As the name?
You can find me search out
Aida.
Aida McDaniel. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Great.
In all those places.
Okay. Thank you so very much. I appreciate this. This was a fabulous conversation. And I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yes, I did. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. I'll talk to you later.